Hello world. Here, okie dokie. So where are we? Oh my word. Okay. Well, you know what the words behind me are supposed to say. Follow your dreams. I'm not gonna adjust the camera. Just gonna allow it to, um, to do its thing. To do its thing, man. Okay, sorry for the wasted 40 seconds. Let's get to it. So today is the 19th of February. At the beginning of the month, my aim was to talk to you about what February means or where it comes from, the etymology of the word February. It comes from the Latin word Februum, February. Februum. Is it Februum? I am not sure. Let me check the PC just to my side here. It's on the other tab. Yeah, it's Februum. It's Februum. So yeah, Februum means purification, right? Which is beautiful. So going into this month, I knew there was an energy hidden in the name of the month that could contextualize things, but I did not find it necessary to pursue it prior to entering the month as I did. You see, with January, Janus, the month of Janus, the Roman god, with that one, because I knew the ritual and I'd been thinking about it throughout December and I think a bit in November, but mainly in December, I wanted to make an expression of it. Whereas with February, I knew to follow up with January, I would make something, but I did not feel compelled to. So yes, it comes from Februum, from the Latin word Februum, which means purification, right? So the last video I made at the airport when I was going to East London on the 12th of February, part 3 of the videos I shot, the live streams I did there, was covering a river ritual, a purification ritual that's done at the river, which I found being suggested in order to heal from the loss I had suffered by virtue of the people who had died in my life as a consequence of living in the socio-economic context I grew up in. I faced relatively more death than most people do at a significantly young age. For the most part, growing up, I used to lament this fact, but having seen the awkwardness of approaching death at an old age, especially the death of someone as close as a parent or a grandparent, if one was close to their grandparent, it's much heavier for adults. As a kid, you are able to sit with it because you know you don't know. Like, you know, you're still new to reality, you know, you're not supposed to have the answers, you haven't really professed much at that age. You don't go around making proclamations that have implications about death that you might not necessarily have followed to their logical conclusion. But yeah, as a kid, it's easier to sit with what has happened until you get used to it. As an adult, you suffer more because you attempt to make sense of it, and death is as senseless as it gets. So yes, the month of February is the month of purification. So what is purification? Purification is refining the information that we have such that it's readily applicable. Impure information is not applicable. That's why lies are despised, even by people who don't profess any particular morality. So yeah, I wanted to share that. And then I think I'll make a separate live stream to continue what I started at the airport. But what I can share about today, about the 19th, is that since the trip to East London, thank you to Siyabulele Samente for the traveling mercies. Yeah, that trip met a couple of people. The initial reason I headed to East London did not really work out, but there were nice discoveries that were made that'll guarantee that there will be a return to East London. So be on the lookout for the next trip report, ongoing trip report. There'll be better coverage of the next one, but in a sense, this is what happened in East London. I went there for a specific reason, to do a translation job. Translation job. Help a guy hear another guy out who did not speak the language that the main guy spoke, but they needed to communicate with each other, and I was there to facilitate. So when I got there, the plot became complicated, and now I was no longer facilitating translation amongst the original two gentlemen, and it was now me helping the initial person I came out to help translate for, helping them sort out their situation so that they are on a platform where they are able to meet the original person I was supposed to translate the conversation with, or for along with this guy that I was now helping out in an unconventional way. So as my name is Peace Be Upon You, I did not get carried with the wind, which a normal person would have been, and they would have ended up spending a lot trying to help this dude out who may have not needed help. So upon this situation not working out, I decided to take a walk around the town, and I made a certain discovery, and this was a beautiful discovery on the nature of the town and the energy in the town. And when Sia drove us to beachfront, I was able to observe the fractionation that exists within the same location. You know, sometimes you assume that you have to travel a significant distance to see the stratas of society, the layers, the socio-economic layers. But most of the time you don't even have to travel at all. You might just cross a street or two or three, but there's usually a stark difference that's separated by a road. So the one in East London, it's between beachfront and the main town. There's a stark difference. So on the beachfront, I found a spot where there were three puddles of three bodies of water, and all these three bodies of water, one was behind me and two were at my side, and the ocean was in front of me. So the two at my side were just before the ocean, and then was the ocean. And all of these were sustaining life, but life in different forms. The small puddle behind me in the in the cave-like structure, was sustaining like tiny crabs, some shell-wearing organisms. And then the one in front of me, but on my right, was sustaining life, like in its youngest form. These looked like hatchlings. They were like tiny fish. There was like this one almost tadpole looking like fish with legs, that was a bit longish, that was hunting these tiny fish, but mainly it was just them in that pool. And it's like reminding me of chesed, the loving kindness, and that characterizes the energy of little children. So that was on my right hand, on the water body on my right hand, and the water body on my left hand was also another body of life, essentially, which had older fish, same species as the one on my right, but older. And it seemed as though they were so big that they couldn't use the stream of water that was connecting the main ocean from that tiny puddle in order to like swim back to the main waters. Like it was almost as though they are waiting for the day there's a high tide that comes and washes everything out, and then that's the only way they're gonna like get back to the ocean. So these three paddles, I was situated at the center of them, and I was communicating and reflecting on the nature of the ocean and the implications of the fact that the ocean exists. So in the last video, when I was at the airport, I dropped part 3 at the part where I was mentioning what the water said to me when I was at the river. At the river, the water said to me when I entered as part of the cleansing ritual that we did there in January on the 6th. The river said to me, life is a river. You also are water. You are flowing water. You just flow in a more static way. I flow more fluidly, said the river to me, and I was like, okay, away. And then the river said, when you exit this water, you will be flowing in a different channel. You'll still be in a river, you will still be water, but you'll be flowing in a different channel. So in a sense, you coming here and asking to be cleansed is you saying that you were stagnant before as a river, in your nature of a river, and you are now flowing. You are acknowledging the flow. And how do we know we are flowing? It's because we grow when we flow. We receive new information. We may not grow physically, but we will grow internally, and that internal growth will reflect through the words we utter or through even our energetic emanations, depending on the bodily configurations we have and how we cultivate that body. So when I went into the river, that's what the river said. The river said, dude, you were already in a river, but it's okay. Just flow now and everything will be okay. And I was like, oh yeah. And even more awesome things happened, because when we got back into the house after the river still on the 6th of January, I had an awesome conversation with I think I mentioned this I remember mentioning this in a live stream somewhere. I'm just going to repeat it just in case, but I think I remember mentioning this somewhere elsewhere in one of these live streams. I think it might be time. Please pull through with the young PC. I'm not talking to you, talking to the universe that's manifesting through the channel through which you are also manifesting. cut in the message unless if you recognize that you are also it, the everything that I speak to when I speak to the God that is revealed by the existence of numbers, the one who exists in the realm of fields, the omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent one, who is here with me right now and who is with you right now, who is you and me. So yeah, pull through with the laptop so I can start editing proper and organizing the narrative. I think enough of it is out now. Yeah, so back into the 6th, 7th, 6th or 7th, I'm not sure. So we get to the beach, né? And not the beach, man. We get to the house after the trip from the river, the cleansing session from the river, and a seed is discovered by one of the children who belongs to Makosetive. And the seed was, I say belongs to because he found it the previous day outside and he told me it was a bead. And I said to him, no, it's not a bead, it's a seed. It only becomes a bead if you open a hole inside of it. And then he was a bit reluctant. And then the next day he comes to me when we come back from the river and he says, look, it has changed color. And I say to him, yeah, that proves it's a seed and not a bead because beads don't do that. And then he says, oh, so what's going to grow from it? I'm like, I don't know. And he decides to plant it. I say plant it elsewhere. He chooses a spot by the wall where there were other plants. And he plants the seed. After he plants the seed, he says, yo, do you think if I peel it, it's going to grow quicker? I'm like, well, yeah, I think so. Because I think most of the time that it's bending there is actually the seed breaking down. So if you peeled it, it makes sense that it would grow quicker. But hey, it's an experiment. Let's do it. And he looks for the seed, and as he looks for the seed, this is Nkanyezi who's looking for the seed that I was talking to about the seed, who reflected on the nature of the seed changing. Nkanyezi means star. Stars are lofty, and yeah, I definitely spoke about this. Okay, but nonetheless, let's continue. And the sister is, older sister, who's like 8 years old. Nkanyezi is 7 years old. Luandle, her name is Ocean. She says, dude, sometimes when I play, I create a map and then I hide the treasure and then I go around and I ask, like, where's my treasure? Where's my treasure? Where's my treasure? And then I find the treasure and I'm like, I celebrate that I found my treasure. But in that moment of where's my treasure, I forget like where my treasure is. But she said, as she says it, the way I'm receiving it is different from how she's saying it, such that I ask her to re-say the same thing she just said, and she says it word for word, which is not how I just said it like previously. Now that was a paraphrase, but she says it word for word, repeating it. And when she repeats it, I'm like, okay, this is awesome. So we create this moment where I explain to them what I heard the first time and what I'm hearing now, the actual words that she's saying now, and I appreciate the words. And then the brother jumps in, Nkanyezi, star, and he says, something else also happens, and he takes a toy he was holding at the time and he buries it. And it's like, sometimes we bury the treasure and he takes out the treasure and he's like, where's my treasure? Can you see the treasure? It's like, where's my treasure? Where's my treasure? And yet the person is holding the treasure, right? And when he said that, those were two lessons, both of those lessons. Firstly, when I arrived at Makosetive's place, I wanted to make a business arrangement with her because the person I had spoken to, who is a disciple of her, had said that my ideas were too broad and vast for him to handle himself, and he advised strongly that I speak to his teacher or mentor or advisor, however they may call the situation. So that was how I arrived, but I found myself holding a treasure map, having buried my treasure. Not that I didn't need help. I was currently, when I met the water people, I was currently communicating with God that exploring reality under the threat of death is not really the best way to encourage someone to do this reality thing, especially given this current configuration. So that came from the pain of loss. So she was right to sense that I needed to heal. But once I healed and asked her to then heal herself, because in as much as she could see that I needed to heal, I could also see that she needed to heal. How she needs to heal, how I saw, is that the day before we went to the river, when her disciples showed up and we spoke, or they spoke, because I just spent time listening. During that day, I spoke to them about the plant by which I gained awareness of the nature of awareness. That is to say, the nature of spirit, as the ancients used to call it. So I told them about this plant, Mimosa hostilis or Acacia tenuiflora, depending on which journals you're referencing from which time period, because the names changed due to some conventions. Even the acacia at some point was no longer acacia, and it was Vachelia. I don't know, that was a different herb of the same class. So I tell them about this one particular herb, which I have with me, and I'm like, hey yo, this herb is, and I tell them what it is, and I tell them what it does. You must understand that at this time, I am in a meeting with beings who are masters of herbs, who have learned herbs from the ether, directly, like pulling information from the void. These are those types of beings, and I'm like, yo, this is the one plant I know about. I know the chemical composition, I know the ethnobotanical background, I know the ethnographic use of the plant, the scientific name. I've seen some pharmacological reports on the constituents. It's a plant I'm familiar with. I'm just attempting to say that. That's why I mentioned it, even in the presence of such beings. And it was good that I did, because this plant would then give me a way to maintain rationality within the whole mystic process of meeting beings who are as magical as I am, to an extent. For as I am now aware, we are on different paths depending on how we choose to handle the information we receive, or if we're even capable of receiving information. So I mentioned this plant, and I start sharing about this plant. The man I'm talking to, Umkhulu, he gets excited, and he says something else about a different story, but carrying the same energy. Makosa Diva jumps in and she says, hey yo, I know this plant. And she goes into this room where also her shrines are. And I don't know if she's going there to consult the spirits in an etheric, like pulling from the ether sense, or if she's going to consult a specific candle or a specific vial of a potion, or if she's just going to catch a piece of paper and write down something. But essentially, she comes back with a piece of paper and she says, this plant is something like La Pachuna de Arco, something like that. But it was Portuguese for the bow tree. It was Portuguese for the bow tree. First things first, the fact that it was Portuguese meant that it was the wrong plant. Even if in Portugal they have a similar plant, I would have come across it, because when I was doing the background on this particular plant, the natives from the mountains from which this plant grows called it Jurema preta, which means black Jurema. Jurema being the plant that grows like up the mountains. It's just like a location type plant. Some plants are like that. Some plants are named by behavior. Some plants are named by where they grow. So this one was named by where it grows. It's like the name is pretty much the black plant that grows up the mountain. It's black because it carries a certain energy. I have not really delved in as deep into the color coding of the native shamans of South America, but so the black aspect of it will live out there. But there is a Jurema Blanco, a white Jurema, in the same sense that there is a Jurema Preta. So when I was looking up the Jurema Preta aspects of Mimosa hostilis, I didn't come across any other societies who named this plant or used it. And when I looked up the plant that she wrongfully identified, the plant I just told them the truth about, the one that she told me about, I read about it later on, and I found out it's a useful plant, man. It's a useful plant. It's a good plant. It's a plant I didn't know about. That's how I usually find out about plants. That's how I learn. People just tell me about them. And this one is good for, like, bacterial infections, parasitic infections, your schistosomiasis, your choleras. Pretty much, when I read the conditions covered, it's usually things we'd give vaccines for, and that it was indicated as treatment for, but the dosage was still a bit finicky. So that's to say, dosage even in like the lab rat studies was not enough that you could infer safely the right dosages for a human. But if you trace the plant back and you follow its ethnographic use, you can usually find the usage. But that plant wasn't researched by me for a particular use. I just researched it to find out why she mistaked it for the one I told her about. And that's how I realized that there is a flaw in the system of reasoning of some traditional healers. The flaw is that the vessel of the spirits, depending on how they are trained, sometimes the vessel is not there as the spirit is communicating. You see, what I am doing is very different from what your traditional sangomas do. What I do is that I receive awareness as chokhmah, as pure wisdom, as a feeling, and then this feeling is converted into bina, into understanding, and then this understanding I convert into da'at, into words, which I share with you. And as the vessel through which these three sephirah of the supernal triad are manifesting, I am here as the information flows through me, so I can see it as I channel it. So in a sense, I'm not really channeling, I'm just communicating with the Most High God by my very being, due to the design of this reality. So that's how I am doing it. Now, how they do it is that they shut down whatever conception they have of this vessel, because they have not studied different mystical traditions and synthesized their own mystical understanding that allows them to co-inhabit the body along with the spirit that brings the knowledge that is new. And that is to say, they are not inspired, they are possessed by the knowledge. Whereas the form of shamanism that I am practicing allows you to be inspired. It allows you to inhale the divine Ruach, the Ruach HaKodesh, the holy breath, and that becomes Chokhmah, that becomes wisdom, and this wisdom converts into Bina, and Bina becomes Da'at. Wisdom becomes understanding, the understanding becomes knowledge, which we can share. So that's the difference between the two systems, and that's what makes me identify a flaw in her system. Now, I show her the flaw and I ask her, I say to her, okay, you said I needed to cleanse, I cleansed, and now that I've cleansed, this is what I've observed in the time I've been spending with you. When you receive these messages, you are not here, and sometimes these spirits of yours possess you without your permission. Yes, you may call them up at certain times, but most of the time they just come in willy-nilly and you have to adjust your day to their arrival, which is fine if you would be there during the possession. So if they didn't possess you and they inspired you, then it would be fine. But because they don't inspire you and they possess you, when they leave, you don't know what it was I was communicating with them. And that was the main problem. Because in the time I had spent there from the first day I met this lady, I was having a moment with her. Even with those spirits entering, I was still having a moment with her. Do you understand? To me, the spirits were not a reason to then switch context and say, I'm no longer communicating with this person, now I'm communicating with another being, so let me close the car. No, it's the same being. It's like Daryl Ankh channeling Bashar. The way he does Bashar is my exact problem with the South African traditional medicine healers, these local shamans. At least some of them in how they do it, because they do it similar to how Daryl Ankh does Bashar. He goes away for Bashar to come in full effect, and there's no need for that to happen. On the Bashar issue, my only problem with the Bashar social memory complex is that it is too American central. Bashar seems to be in consort with the American military. His timelines and the restrictions he places upon himself and upon the collective he claims to represent align too well with the fears of the American government. It may be that Bashar seeks to protect his vessel, Daryl, yet there are ways in which he could communicate, ways which what he calls the hybrids, which the ancients have always called the adepts. We've always been here. It's not a new thing. We are not brought about by genetic manipulation of the current technology. CRISPR may have given rise to people for whom accessing the nature of an adept is easily achievable, but that's not to say that these hybrids, as Bashar calls them, are a new phenomena. And he may have said this in his live stream or whatnot. It doesn't matter. All I'm saying is the American influence is apparent even in the social memory complex you are manifesting, dude. Your social memory complex is not pure logic. I can sense the intent behind it. And as much as Bashar comes in and says, follow the truth and follow the narrative you choose for yourself, whatever that narrative is, towards the manifestation of the reality which you choose to manifest, the reality which Daryl has manifested in projecting Bashar's message, even in the absence of Daryl's consciousness. Maybe it's by virtue of the body that Bashar is channeling through, but the vessel's bias is coming through the social memory complex's logic, which is funny and beautiful to observe. It's one of those nice things about this reality, observing consciousnesses at different scales and levels. I remember when I was in grade 2 and my consciousness was just that I was in school and in grade 2. And now I'm contemplating social memory complexes because that's what happens after history. You see, with history, you go back, you go so far back, you realize there's no going back anymore, and you've covered like the beginning of whatever civilization's history you were considering, and then you come across an older civilization and you study them until you study the older civilization for which you have access. And then after studying all of those civilizations, you realize that there's always been just one civilization, the particle and the field, which are one. Yet, by virtue of perspective, they look as though the field is acting on the particle. And yeah, that's the only history, that's the only phenomena, that's the only fact that's happening, is the particle and the field. And when you get to this level of the particle and the field, and you apply a lens similar to statistics, like the lens of a population parameter and a sample statistic. Many sample statistics together give you the population parameter, which is closer to the objective or the ultimate truth, right? And yeah, okay, I've digressed. It's been 40 minutes, started on the 19th. Okay, cool. So I think I've covered a bit of what I was not intending to cover, which was the river cleanse, but the river cleanse was necessary to cover because this is the month of purification, and that was a prelude to the ocean cleanse. And the purification that came from the ocean was twofold. Firstly, it's that scene with the 3 paddles that I was describing, and the next scene was on contemplating the nature of waves. See, I enjoy fringe science. I watched a series called Fringe many years ago, and my reality has not been the same ever since. Which is beautiful. I appreciate the synchronicity. I watched Fringe in 2014. So what happened was, with Fringe, okay, so just where do I even start? Okay. Fringe is based on notions and concepts that are usually considered as pseudoscience being real and being implemented by a seemingly crazy guy from Harvard, Walter, and yeah, he helps the cops out in a covert type way, and the show revolves around this FBI agent who's then involved in these multi-dimensional experiences and so on and so on. So I watched this series and I heard the word LSD for the first time, and it registered in my consciousness: lysergic acid, diethylamide, and dimethyltryptamine. And the reason these registered is because Walter was using a soup of psychedelics in order to quiet Olivia's mind enough to be able to receive impressions from the subconscious mind of an agent who was unconscious at the time. And they needed to find out the details of the suspect, which the unconscious agent had seen. So I researched these substances and I read the journals. It was almost like living a Vampire Diaries experience, because that's how Elena discovers the supernatural world, by studying the journals from Mystic Falls, the Gilbert journals. And so I studied some journals also, studied scientific journals, read about lysergic acid, diethylamide, and dimethyltryptamine. And I also decided to throw in tetrahydrocannabinol in there, the THC, because I was like, if I'm studying these, I might as well study you, because I've been told so many things about you, but what's the objective truth? So I started studying these substances, and yeah, alternate dimensions exist. I am in it. Yet my body is still physically located in the same old dimension, which is pretty cool way to travel. And yeah, so I watched Fringe. Why was I mentioning Fringe? Okay, it's been 14 minutes. Oh yeah, so the river cleanse. The river flows ultimately. Oh yeah, so I was considering the pseudoscience of a, not the pseudoscience of a, I was reading a Fringe journal. So there's a journal written by people in the conventional scientific community, but for topics on which they would not get proper engagement if they tried to publish them in conventional scientific journals. So picture a doctor who discovers something that disproves what was a fundamental principle in his training. This is a fact. He cannot deny the evidence, and yet he realizes that if he proposes it, he's going to face a lot of resistance, not by merit of the idea, but it's going to face resistance by virtue of the fact that it breaks one of the fundamental tenets. Because we don't exist in a world of truth, we exist in a world where people choose based on convenience. And convenience is what has made this reality as it is, not fact. Not like, it doesn't have to be this way. This can be so awesome, guys. What I'm experiencing right now is like a small portion of how awesome this reality can be. What I'm experiencing is existing to fulfill the purpose of my name, which is peace be upon you. Granted, right now I'm between situations. Actually, let's pause this one here, and I'll catch you on the Investech update. Speaking of situations.